Hi, I'm Funmi Fetto. This is On Reflection, the beauty podcast with a global view on beauty, in association with Sunday Riley, certified B Corp, cruelty-free skincare, powered by science, balanced by botanicals. A little later, we'll talk about the rise of Tweakments with Dr. Lauren Hamilton. Are they skewing our ideals of beauty? But first, required reading. This is a section of the show where we discuss beauty news, topics and features that have caught our attention. This week, my guest is Chloe Hall, USL's beauty director. She joins us from LA to share her thoughts on Trump's politically charged hair, systemic medical racism, Gen Z beauty, and TikTok. Chloe, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
I love the stories that you put forward. I mean, I gorged on all of them. I wanted to start with Trump's hair. His politically charged hair.
Yes.
This is a story on GQ.com about Trump deducting $70,000 from his taxes and attributing this to hairstyling services. The first thing I thought when this news broke was Trump has either had a number of hair transplants or his hairstylist has totally ripped him off. But, you know, this feature is actually so much more than that. Yes, it talks about the cost and the issues around hair and politics, which is a bit of a thing. But it also touches on the silence from the pro-Trump camp and politicians and all their justification around it. And the fact that women in politics have largely been bearing the brunt of the weaponization of haircuts. What was it that made you choose this story?
I mean, I want to start by saying charging this is illegal. Trump's choice to use his taxes for haircuts is illegal and wrong. Yeah. There's a really great New York Times piece that gets into it, but I particularly wanted to send this piece because this angle is more about this happens all the time. Hold this haircut to be a symbol of who we are. It separates I don't know how to say this in a more elegant tone, but like the country folk in the US versus the big corporate Wall Streeters. Like we've seen this play out in the political scheme. So I thought that was just such an interesting angle. And then with politicalizing hair, of course, women is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw part of this was AOC came out and was like, I got highlights on my birthday and Fox News would not stop playing it. Like, but this is fine, you know? So I think it's, again, that hypocrisy and misogynistic nature that comes with this haircut, which I thought was just so interesting how we politicalize the haircut of politicians.
Even looking back at Hillary Clinton, you can see how she's been judged so much on her hair. You made a point about AOC. She actually tweeted about this when this news came out about Trump. And she said, last year, Republicans blasted a fire hose of hatred and vitriol my way because I treated myself to a $250 cut and lowlights. Where's the criticism of their idol spending $70,000 on hairstyling? Oh, it's nowhere because they're spineless, misogynistic hypocrites. And I think she summed that up really, really well because the vitriol that came her way when she had her hair done was ridiculous. It was maddening. And you knew it was down to the fact that she's a woman.
Completely. Even prepping for this interview, I was going back to see the articles and every single headline was like self-declared socialist pays this much money for a haircut. Like it was just an attack campaign essentially for her getting her hair done on her birthday. And I think exactly what you said. She summed it up so perfectly in her tweet because she's like, oh, you guys just hate women, essentially. Like that's what's going on. It's like, got it, noted, you know? Again, what you were going to your initial point of how somehow the Trump campaign and the Trump people, this isn't a big deal for them. Their ability to look the other way and the hypocrisy, it comes out more and more at all levels, whether it be a pandemic or a haircut. Their inability to search for truth is just astonishing. But I think, I hope, I pray, I dream that the American people are realizing this and are voting and taking this into consideration of just who this man is and the values he upholds and how he lies on his taxes about haircuts.
I saw that headline. I think it was in the Washington Times where it said the self-declared socialist AOC splurges on a high-dollar hairstyle. And I thought, it's that insinuation that being a socialist means you have to have bad hair or it has to be really cheap. And therefore it makes you a better person. You know, you're a better person if you have an inexpensive haircut.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the policing of women in general. Like we talked about Hillary, Michelle Obama couldn't wear a jacket to like a holiday event without the price tag being called out. We constantly police women in their decisions, especially in politics. But when there's ever a chance to flip it or the reverse, it's silence. So I thought this piece was really great because it addressed that. Like we politicize the haircut. So yes, this is important. We can't dismiss it because of this terrible track record to AOC, to Hillary Clinton, to Michelle Obama and other female politicians.
Yeah,
Even
I love
Nancy
Hillary Clinton had that famous quote where she joked that she should have titled her memoir The Scrunchy Chronicles, 112 countries, and it's still all about my hair. I mean,
Exactly.
it's been going on for so long. There was a psychology professor who says here that it's so consistent with the trap we've created where we teach women that the most important thing they can be is physically beautiful, but then they criticize women for responding to that pressure. That was a moment that made me really think, and I totally agree.
I completely agree. And I wish we were there yet. I think it was so powerful when AOC, if you saw, she did a Vogue Beauty Secrets. She's talking about equality for all and trans rights and these incredible topics while applying a red lipstick. So I think you can have it all, essentially. You can get a $750 haircut and be into your hair and your makeup and your beauty. And you could also sit on the Congress floor. I don't think they allow women to operate in these worlds where you can be a full, unique human, you know? So I think that's another really strong point of we preach these beauty values and we're both into beauty, which is no fault at all. But I think it's the policing and the tone that they go about it that, again, is disheartening. And we have these conversations again and again.
It really taps into the other piece that you chose in USL called Too Pretty to Be a Doctor. It's that whole idea that if you are deemed attractive or you look like you actually take care of your physical appearance, then it diminishes your intellect.
Exactly. I think it's going to, again, I keep harping on this point, but of policing women. There's some freedom in existence. So I don't think you could be too pretty or too anything to be a doctor. What I liked about that piece so much is that these women during a pandemic where you need medical information are reaching to the masses, going on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and things like that. And the comments aren't filled with thankful feedback or knowledge or questions. They're filled with critiques. Did you get plastic surgery? And all these essentially internet trolls coming for like the medical industry, first responders, the people, really the essential people right now. The piece ended on a really great point that I liked where we need to have these conversations. Like them coming forward allows other doctors to be like, oh, this happens to me. There's so many fields where you create a certain standard and it doesn't allow for different types of people.
One of the things that really struck me with this piece was the acknowledgement that women are some of the best upholders of patriarchy, that we as women, we police and we also are guilty of holding other women to a particular standard of appearance and behavior. I mean, this really resonated, and I hated the fact that it resonated because you don't want to seem like you're not standing in solidarity with your fellow women. But I have certainly experience some of this kind of behavior. You know, some of my biggest takedowns about the appropriateness, or should I say the inappropriateness of what I'm wearing, whether sartorially or what I'm wearing on my face, has actually come from other women.
Oh, yes, completely. I mean, I think the first story that comes to mind, I'll never forget in high school. We were through a heat wave. So I went to school in California. We were going through a heat wave. So I was wearing shorts and my hair up. And the school nurse pulled me aside and she was like, your outfit is so inappropriate. You're just another piece of meat. Don't act like this. You're causing all these attention, and really like completely destroyed me. And not to read my high school resume or anything like that, but I was in all AP classes. I had a 4.6, you know what I mean? So just that lack of seeing me for who I really was and just completely judging me on this superficial thing. And it's a female nurse, you know, at my school. I'm 15 years old. We experience these things in our lives and we kind of internalize them because, of course, I went home and was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have worn that. And things like that, where it's like, no, I think like this was wrong. So I think pieces like this are so helpful because it tells you like this was wrong, you know?
We need to shed a bit more light on this sort of behavior, and we need to have more conversations about this. I feel these conversations are not had enough. You know, when you were just describing your experience, I remembered an experience that I had on public transport. I was just about to get on a train and a lady said to me, she sort of tapped me, but quite sort of aggressively and almost as if she was irritated by what she was about to tell me. And she said, your slip is showing. And she looked so appalled and so repulsed by the fact that my slip was showing. Anyone would have thought I'd walked out butt naked. Mm-hmm. And then I felt, and the horrible thing about it was that I then started to feel really guilty, and I started to feel a sense of shame. It was just the most bizarre thing. You know, if you see a woman who has like a label sticking out, and you kind of do it really kindly and really discreetly and say, oh, you know, your label sticking out. I mean, you probably can't do that so much now with nobody touching anyone. But I think that's fine. And that's a lovely, wonderful thing to do. But she did it in such a way that made me feel like what was happening with my underskirt was incredibly immoral and inappropriate and shameful. And for one woman to do that to another woman, that is just not right.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's like, this is actually a funny tie-in, but I've been seeing a lot on TikTok where they go like internalized misogyny. There's this thing where we tear down other women, or we don't like other women, or I don't like this person and that person for really totally male view, terrible reasons. And I think stepping away from that is the only positive way. I try to operate in compassion of like, what's going on in her life that she feels that my body or how I'm acting is vulgar or dangerous or anything to her. I think it's so true. It's like, I agree with you completely of your tag sticking out, lipstick on my teeth, all fair game. It's when it crosses that line of you are personally attacking me for my fashion choices, beauty choices, physical body, everything, hair. I think we need to look at and think, what's the root of this? Why does she feel it's okay to approach you? Yeah. You know, like where's that comfort level? It's good that we're talking about it. I try to think on the solution all the time, and I don't know, because it's just a weird, right? Isn't it a weird
It's thing? So weird. I think also we have, like you say, we've internalized a level of misogyny without realizing it. We've taken on some of those attributes that we associate with male behavior. And in actual fact, there's a lot of things that women do, and we're kind of going slightly off base here, but there are a lot of things that women do, and they are complicit in this whole thing of judging a woman who looks a certain way and diminishing her intellect because of the way she looks.
The more we can talk about these things, the more people could feel less alone, because I think this happens so often. I felt shame to these things. So now getting to see people with complete ownership of their body and complete ownership of who they are, and a doctor wearing lipstick is not a slight or less of a doctor. You know what I mean?
It's not so radical. It's like, come on, it's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine. I'd love to talk about your piece in USL called She Knew It Was Cancer. It is essentially a story around racism within the medical industry. I was so enraged when I read this. My stomach was churning. It made me feel quite emotional, but it made me feel really angry. Here in the UK, you know, we have stats that show Black women are 5 times more likely to die in pregnancy or in childbirth. But it was actually a new revelation how this racism manifests itself in other areas of the medical profession.
This story I worked on for the last couple of months, I would say like starting in the beginning of the summer. And I just wanted to do it right because one, Jessica Florence is so wonderful, and there's such a bravery to telling your story and your experience. But I completely agree with you in that when I was listening to her, it's almost like you want to pull your hair out. When she keeps telling me I'm going to the doctor and I'm telling them these symptoms, and she's not getting any answers. And we live in a world where if you even have a rash, you Google it and you find all these results and you go to your doctor and you test. So just to hear how she was just continually failed at every step was, again, that rage. Everyone has that feeling of not being believed, let alone not being believed for something that's essentially deadly. So I think that rage is so true and so real. But what really also helped me is that Jessica has become such a light and advocate that she's just channeled that rage into good. And that's what helped talking to the other doctors. Dr. Silber at Yale University here in the US was also helpful in that she felt this rage. You have to look at every case and every instance and operate with such a level of compassion. We hold the medical industry to such a high standard, and it's so deserving, but we also have to look at the flawed human part, and that is racism, essentially, and bias and things like that.
Disparities in healthcare have been attributed to social inequalities. There is an element of that is true, but that's not the whole story. Serena Williams had to plead with her medical team to provide a CT scan because they didn't believe that she had developed a clot on her lungs, and that could have been fatal. And she had to plead with them. And it's yet another example of people being unwilling to listen to Black voices. It seems pervasive across all levels of society.
Exactly. I think that's the kicker. Here in the United States, we're going through everyone is having some sort of awakening, of beauty brands and looking at the racism internally. And I don't think the medical industry is exempt from that. They too need to look at the structures and the foundations. I think it essentially comes down to racism with the example of Serena, with the example of Jessica. She's an architecture student. She's going to these appointments with her family. And then on the flip side, I talked to Dr. Silber about her patients who can't get childcare, have to check the bus. I think it's an all-encompassing, you can't paint a one look of what Blackness looks like. Blackness exists in so many different shapes and forms, but the racism is what the medical industry needs to look at right now. I loved Dr. Silber's quote of we spend all this research looking for some genetic difference under a microscope, but we don't look what's really in front of our eyes, which is racism. I think we all need to operate with this compassion chip and looking at, again, the whole picture.
One of the other things that stood out in this article, that idea of Black pain and what Black pain is. And there is this idea that Black people feel less pain than their Caucasian counterparts, which is another reason why a lot of their voices within the medical industry goes unheard. It's like it's another way of dehumanizing Black people. Our pain is not considered on the same level as Caucasian pain, from what I can see and what a lot of the stats are telling me, which is why when a woman says, this is happening in my body and this does not feel normal, and these headaches I'm getting, that's not normal, the nausea I'm feeling isn't normal, and it's just dismissed because Black pain is not considered on a high enough level for the medical profession to pay as much attention.
Completely. I think it's somewhat ingrained in our system, which again needs a complete tear down and burn it, tear it down, and then rebuild it. We treat Black women in such a way that it causes all of these ripple effects. We treat them so we dehumanize them. We don't think of them as equal, and we do all these things. So it should be no shock when you see these terrible life-threatening statistics that they're dying in childbirth, that there are higher rates of breast cancer because of the fundamental way we have, in the US since slavery, treated Black bodies. And I think we need to reckon with that, and we need to educate ourselves and change and move. And the book Caste gets into this. I think what got cut from the piece a little bit was about how Black individuals are less likely to be part of clinical trials, but it's a two-way street because we have a terrible history of experimenting on Black bodies. Of course, you would be less likely to be part of a clinical trial. It's just, again, going back to what you're saying, just looking at this whole picture of what we've done to the Black woman, how we haven't supported her, that's led to things like this, and then actively changing it. So yeah, and I think Jessica's doing it in her way. I think Dr. Silber's doing it in her way. I think you having me on your podcast to talk about it is doing it in your way. So it's again, going back to bringing this full circle, your point, it makes you want to pull your hair out. It really does. It's defeating and it's deadly. But again, we have to keep having these conversations and having actual change to essentially save lives.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for sharing that piece. And now to something a little lighter. There were two pieces that you put forward. One was what it means to be a Gen Z beauty brand today in the New York Times. And the other was, will beauty's TikTok love affair last? And that was in the Business of Fashion.
I think I have a crush on the entire Gen Z population. I just am so intrigued by the youth. I feel like I grew up a millennial, so I was always had all these things applied to me. And now I finally feel like I have a new generation where I could kind of look at with binoculars a little bit. And TikTok is a great tool to do that. So yes, I'm very excited to chat about the Gen Zers, the youths.
They are activist generation. And for any beauty brand now that wants to reach that generation and that demographic, they absolutely have to be on TikTok. I do think that they can't sort of sit out the Isaac cultural moments that we're seeing right now, be it the conversations around the importance of voting or racial injustices or sustainability. Last week, we talked about beauty being political, literally political, as in encouraging people to vote and so on. But we also talked about beauty brands standing for something. And certainly with Gen Zs, you cannot afford to be neutral or stay silent.
Completely. I think it stems from essentially Gen Z is going to inherit the worst state of the world, right? Climate change is real. Our economy in the US is insane. So I think they look at it with like, we have to have our voice be heard essentially because the world is changing and they're inheriting it in this dire state. I think that's what I admire about them so much is their mentality to strip away all of this consumerism, it feels like, and get to the root and the core. I think a lot of brands were in this, at least here in the United States, were in this kind of rush for what I would say woke content, right? Like the black squares on Instagram, and they were in this rush. It would be in a completely white feed, and then there would be now black models come the end of June. So I think Gen Z sees that, and now they have the tools to call you out on Twitter or on TikTok in a very funny and unique way. So I think they're like the best generation. When I see these videos of them and they're like politically engaged, they're back to ingredients that matter. Luxury is not a thing, sustainability matters. I'm just like, wow, the kids, that very common quote, the kids are all right, essentially. Like they are doing good.
I love the fact that they've also stripped back a lot of polish. So brands are kind of used to everything looking so perfect and so highly produced. And they are like super lo-fi and everything has to look quite real. And they're the sort of antithesis of perfection in many ways, aren't they? And I love the fact that there are a lot of brands tapping into that.
Completely. I find it so refreshing.
It is refreshing.
Right? I think I grew up in the aspirational but attainable generation of this like rise of the influencer. So it would be this amazing house that I could never have with this cabinet of products that I could never afford. You know what I mean? And now I think what I find so like unique is it's drugstore products. They love drugstore products in their messy room, in their cabinet. There's so much realness to it about this more human connection that I think they've kind of won the game. And I love to see brands respond to that because I think it's smart. I think it's responsible, and they're spending dollars so powerful. Yeah. So I think brands waking up to this are just kind of brilliant on both ends.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Chloe, for coming on the show this week.
Thank you so much. This was truly an honor.
Great stories, great choices.
Thank you.
It's time for In Praise Of. This is a section of the show where we laud the merits of a single beauty product. This week, it's Sunday Riley's CEO Glow Vitamin C plus Turmeric Face Oil. I'll be honest, historically, oils have terrified me. When I see oil, I see pore clogger. Thankfully, being a beauty editor means in order to do my job properly, I have to try products that I would normally automatically kick to the curb without trying. I'm so glad I no longer have that option. Otherwise, I would have missed out on this hydrating and radiance-inducing gem. Firstly, let's get the turmeric thing out of the way. So this is not the stuff on your recipe sheet. It's a special extract of turmeric oil that increases radiance, i.e. it gives your skin life. Now, the texture. It is light, non-greasy, hydrating, and it definitely does not clog your pores. That's because it's brilliantly formulated. It's also a stable oil-soluble vitamin C, which, by the way, is a big deal. Most vitamin C formulas are notorious for losing their potency as soon as you start using it. The blend includes red raspberry seed oil, evening primrose oil, and ginger root extract, meaning it's excellent for dark spots, unevenness, fine lines, hyperpigmentation, and redness. Is that too much to remember? Well, okay, just think of it this way. It's a bit like J-Lo. It's fabulous, it works hard for the money, does a bit of everything, and gives good glow. Now, Botox, fillers, non-surgical nose jobs. This week's Talking Points tackles Tweakments. We ask why they're growing in popularity, why are Black women keeping quiet about it, what does it say about our attitude to aging? With me to discuss all of this is Dr. Lauren Hamilton. She's the founder of Victor and Garth, the aesthetic clinic in Shoreditch. She also has a residency on London's Harley Street and is one of the rising stars in the aesthetic industry. Great to have you here, Lauren.
Thank you for having me, Funmi.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. I probably take it for granted that everybody knows what Tweakments are, but they don't. Tell us, what are Tweakments?
Yeah, so Tweakments, they're just little tweaks that you can have every now and again to help with anti-aging, making you look a bit more refreshed. Instead of having to go under the knife for surgery, you can have a little Tweakment in your lunchtime. The things that would comprise this would be Botox, fillers, skin boosters, laser, microneedling, so a whole host of things, whether it's injectables or machine-based.
And I guess one of the things that pulls all of this together is that these are cosmetic procedures that you can have without going under the knife. And as you say, they are short enough for you to have them in your lunchtime and they require little or no downtime.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to know what the most popular ones are, what exactly they do, how long they last.
So Botox is a neurotoxin protein produced by the bacterium Clostridium bacterium.
Oh my goodness. Okay, that sounds incredibly scientific. Tell me what the effects are on your skin.
So for Botox, you're looking to relax, soften the muscles. So anyone who's got concerns about wrinkles, so the forehead wrinkles, around the eyes, crow's feet, or frown, then they'll be looking to have Botox. A injectable treatment only takes about maybe 30 minutes and then longer if you're including the consultation. But essentially, you're looking to relax the muscle and relax the overactive movement of the muscle. So the dynamic lines, we say, and to an extent, it can help with those lines that you see at rest. A lot of people, they're looking in the mirror, doing their makeup, frowning, and then they start to notice those 11s between their eyebrows or those horizontal lines on their forehead.
It's interesting that you talk about people looking in the mirror, because I think at the moment it's not so much the mirror, it's Zoom, and we'll come to that. Yes. We are all looking at ourselves so much more than we've ever looked at ourselves before, and we are analysing and over-analysing all the different aspects of our features that we once deemed normal.
Yeah.
Tell me, with Botox, how long do the effects last?
Yes.
And how often should you be having them, say, a year?
So with Botox, it lasts around 3 to 4 months. And that is a little bit tricky for some people because you wish that the effects would be a lot longer. But then it's a good thing on the flip side because then the results are temporary. It doesn't last forever. So if you're not happy with the treatment, you know it will wear off. And that's the same for any side effects that you may see. In terms of the common side effects, bleeding, bruising, redness, some swelling. And those are just acceptable ones that you may have that don't last for very long. The more worrying ones would be raising of the eyebrow, drooping of the eyebrow, or drooping of the eyelid. And those are very rare, but you have to go through that with the patient and explain that these are things that could happen with the injectable.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. But then it's temporary.
Not terrifying at all. But I guess, there are more stories of Botox not going wrong than there are of those that do go wrong. Yes. Tell us about fillers. What are they and how do they work? Because I find them quite fascinating, the way they can be used in different aspects of the face. We were talking just earlier on that you can even use them to reshape the nose.
I may just add, just with the Botox, it can be used for medical reasons.
Okay.
So as well as for the cosmetic purposes of the wrinkles, you've got migraine treatment.
How would you use it for a migraine treatment? Where would you inject it?
So that just takes a real thorough consultation. It depends on where you're getting the migraines, but it can be used all over the face and scalp essentially and down to the neck.
Oh, wow.
Depending on where your pain points are.
Okay.
And it really is effective for that in just decreasing the amount of migraines that you get. You can also use it for people who are clenching their teeth. So I've seen a lot of patients with that recently, with increased anxiety. So placing a bit of Botox in the masseter muscle really helps just relax that and not make it so overactive. And
also people having it injected under their arms to stop them from sweating so much. I think it's genius.
It is, but there are people who really suffer from it, sweating more than the average person. It really does interfere with their work life, their personal life. So for those type of patients, it's a really effective treatment. And you can have it underarms, groins, hands and feet. So lots of different uses for Botox.
Okay. And then fillers.
So fillers can be from permanent to semi-permanent to non-permanent. And I think right now the most popular type of filler seems to be hyaluronic acid. So that's a synthetic version of hyaluronic acid, which is found within our bodies. And it's very good for volumizing, adding some plumpness and hydration to the area. You can have that almost anywhere in your face, depending on what your concerns are. So your nose to mouth lines, lips, cheeks, and it just replaces the volume that's been lost. Lasts around 6 months to 18 months. So the different fillers all have a different type of thickness. So you place it in a certain area depending on what you're trying to recreate. So for the lips, you're looking for a more thin filler. So that unfortunately doesn't last as long. It's only about 3 to 6 months. But with the larger areas like your cheek and chin, you're looking at more 12 to 18 months.
What have you discovered is the most requested filler?
Oh, that's very tricky. I think lips will always be the most popular one. That's the one that is very accessible to people and everyone likes the idea of.
I would have thought that with lips, not so much with black women.
No, so they want it for a different reason, more to add definition rather than volume and to help with hydration.
Right.
So with black women in particular, they're probably more concerned about the volume lost. So they're becoming for chin filler, mid-face cheek filler, jawline filler, anything that adds a bit more sharpness and definition.
So when they come in for nose fillers, is that to completely reshape the nose?
So not to completely reshape it, but they're just looking for a less broader, more smaller, narrower nose, of like the Western ideal.
Oh,
I hate
God.
to say that because I don't really want to be endorsing us moving away from our ethnicity.
That's what they're asking for. And that's slightly troubling for me. I was having a conversation with someone earlier and we were talking about how beauty ideals are evolving. And sometimes I feel like they are. And then other times I think, well, actually, no, because the beauty ideal fundamentally is still very Eurocentric. These are the issues that people have with Tweakments and how they're used to change features.
It's all about enhancing your natural features. That's why you need to be seeing a good practitioner.
I wanted to talk about Zoom, and we touched on that briefly. I really think Zoom is having such a detrimental effect on our sense of self. You know, we really have never stared at our faces so much. And I remember us talking about this recently, and you mentioned that between us coming out of lockdown and now you've seen a huge rise in people coming in and wanting fillers. And I wonder whether you think it's down to having to look at our faces all the time. We've become increasingly self-critical.
Before lockdown, we were all very obsessed with the lines that you see from the movement of the muscle. So Botox was definitely more accessible for people. But now you're having a lot of conference calls, FaceTime and family, you're seeing your reflection a lot more. And you're just picking up on other signs of aging that you might not have been aware of before.
One of the things that I've noticed is that it's becoming much more prevalent within the younger generation, the Gen Z and millennials. A good proportion of them are having Tweakments. Why do you think this is? I mean, surely they can't be thinking about aging so early on, or are they?
So with Botox, there's definitely an argument for prevention to stop the lines forming or getting deeper. But I think the problem lies in the fact that if you're starting, say, 21 and the lines haven't even appeared, how long do you have to keep going for to actually stop those lines appearing? And it's just such a huge commitment for your adult life. And also, these clinics are everywhere now. So when I was growing up, there wasn't a clinic in sight that I knew of or that was accessible that I could afford to go to.
That's another thing that concerns me, that a lot of people are going to cowboys to have work done. And you do see a lot of work that is quite terrifying.
I think the issue is that non-surgical treatments, so injectables, are seen as an extension of beauty treatments, and that you can just go to your local salon and have anyone inject you. It's an unregulated industry, unfortunately, which means anyone can take a course or pick up a needle and inject. And there needs to definitely be more safety in the field to make sure we are doing the best by our patients.
There's the safety aspect of it, and there's the ethical aspect of it as well, because there are a lot of doctors out there, and where I see their patients, I think, why are you still working on this person's face? It is so obvious that this person has a warped sense of their own image. But surely it's for the doctor to be able to say, actually, no, I'm not going to give you any more filler. No, we're not going to stretch that bit and do this and do that and inject more of whatever because you just don't need it anymore. I know you work a lot with the safe space.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that and how that feeds into your work and the decisions you make when clients come to you and ask to have certain procedures.
So I think that's where the consultation is very key. When someone comes to see me, we have a long chat about what it is that they want, what I think could be achieved. So they may just come in for one thing, but actually they're better off having something else. It's up to the medical professional to make sure that they're doing the right thing by the patient. If there's any red flags, and I think actually someone would do better by having therapy, then I'll always broach that with them. And sometimes it can be a really difficult conversation to have. Working with the Self Space is something I'm very fortunate to have. They are a collective of therapists. You can access them easily. You don't need a GP referral, so you can self-refer. They specialize in a number of things, but body image is definitely something that's at the heart of what they do as well.
One of the other things I wanted to speak to you about, the stigma and the shame and the secrecy that surrounds Black women having tweakments. A piece I wrote for British Vogue recently is about Black women being quiet and silent about having tweakments. And the response has been incredible. A lot of women have said, gosh, you know, I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. Everyone keeps quiet about it. I was having it and I never spoke about it because I felt that I was going to be judged. I've argued that part of the pressure to stay silent has come down to us sporting that Black don't crack narrative as if it were some sort of badge of honor. I wondered whether this is particular to a certain generation and whether this is changing or whether you're seeing any signs of this changing.
So definitely the notion of Black don't crack will keep people away or make people a little bit more secretive about what they're having. There was so much stigma attached to having non-surgical treatments, and now it is a little bit more in the open and people are a little bit more happy to shout about it, but not as much as, say, getting your hair done or something like that. And for Black women and Black men in particular...
Do you have quite a lot of Black men coming in for treatments?
I do actually,
wow,
yes.
That's interesting.
And people always talk about that as if, oh, that's really strange that they are coming, but everyone wants to take care of their appearance, don't they? So it shouldn't be just white women that are having these. It should be accessible to everyone.
But what do you say about the argument that when a lot of people from the Black community are coming in to have certain work done, it is to reshape and redefine their features so it links into the Eurocentric ideal of what beauty is? Isn't that where the problem lies, that they're coming in to have their nose thinned out or their nose made more pointy or whatever, and having all of their features a bit closer to whiteness?
So the patients that I see, they're coming in and they are having just treatments. It will just be one thing just to help them boost their self-esteem and their confidence. And I definitely don't work towards a beauty ideal. I think everyone is individual and we should embrace that. A lot of people just want to look a bit more refreshed. They're concerned about aging. They want to just look like their former selves. So definitely the older generation are coming in. They've just got pictures of what they used to look like, and that's what they're trying to achieve. With the younger generation, yes, they may be a bit more swayed towards that beauty ideal, and that's always tricky to try and unpick that. Yes.
I would have thought that the younger generation would have been more in tune to being themselves. You know, there's all this talk of owning who you are and, you know, being body positive and being authentic about your true self and so on. And I feel like the younger generation don't have the baggage that maybe older generations had, because the conversations now are a little bit different and we are seeing so many types of beauty being shown to us.
That's definitely something that I would have thought as well. But as we age, we do become more comfortable in ourselves. The younger generation are definitely exposed to social media in a way that we were never exposed. And that still reinforces the ideal of Western beauty. So they've got the filters to change how they look. They're striving to look like celebrities who probably
all have work done.
Yes, exactly. and aren't so truthful about it. But then also, there's not that many people that look like them that they can look up to and say, right, okay, I can embrace the way I look right now.
I do think encouraging people to love themselves as they are, it has to be a work that takes place everywhere, from advertising standards, beauty brands, what people are showing on social media, because this is years of indoctrinating people that this is what beauty looks like.
Yes.
One thing I want to touch on, and just linking into the issue with Black women being silent about these treatments.
Yes.
One of the things that kept on coming up was the fact that Black women who hadn't had the treatments but were curious about it were fearful because they were not sure whether this actually worked on Black skin and whether it is safe. You know, one of the criticisms of the aesthetic industry is that there isn't enough clinical trials or research or even marketing that takes Black people into account.
There's definitely a valid concern. So I think back in the day, a lot of the research was directed at the Caucasian population, and the fillers and Botox were tried and tested on them to make sure that they actually worked and the results were reproducible. But they neglected the Asian and African population. But now there's definitely more studies. You have to go searching for them, but more and more people are aware that things need to change. I would say that they are safe, non-surgical treatments for all ethnicities, and the results can be very good in the right hands. In terms of the marketing, there's still not enough. Different faces, Black faces, Black men, in the marketed materials and across the board for advertising to make sure that these companies speak to everyone and they feel like there's a place for them there and that they're wanted.
It's yet another aspect of the beauty industry where representation is an issue, or lack of representation is an issue. So how do you determine how to use injectables on individuals? I mean, does ethnicity and face shape and all of that sort of stuff, does it make a difference?
Yes, totally. So during the consultation, you'll be analysing the patient's face and just thinking about what approach you're going to take to achieve the best results. And it's important to know that you shouldn't be sticking by a protocol of injecting this much filler there, because everyone's face shape is so different. That's where your artistic eye comes into play.
And so it looks more realistic.
Yes, exactly. So you're not taking them away from their ethnicity, but you're naturally enhancing what they've got.
And so finally, what should you know before getting work done? What are the questions that should be asked? And how do you know that an esthetician is reputable?
Gosh, so loads of questions. I see loads of patients coming in with a whole list of questions for me.
But that's good,
right? It's really good, yeah. It shows that they've taken control and they actually really want to make sure that they're doing the right thing, because it can be such a scary experience to actually just book an appointment and step through into those clinic doors. So what you should be looking out for is just making sure that you're seeing a medical professional if you're going to have injectable treatments. You just make sure that they're with a registration body, so the GMC or GDC or NMC, making sure that they've actually done the training and they've got the qualifications to back that up. You can always ask to see those as well. And that,
gosh, that would be awkward. Maybe ask over email.
It can be really tricky because you can do a one-day course and then you're certified to go and practice on
That
patients.
Is terrifying.
Yeah.
That is absolutely terrifying.
You need someone who really is dedicated to their profession.
Word of mouth is probably quite a good thing as well.
Word of mouth and reviews, Making sure that they've got a good aftercare service as well, because sometimes you could have a treatment and then suddenly you don't know how to contact them or what to do in the event of a side effect. So a good practitioner shouldn't leave you in the dark about things like that. If you go into the clinic room and something just doesn't feel right, then at the end of the day, it's your face, it's your body. You are entitled to just say, actually, no, I'm not going to go ahead with this. And if you need more thinking time, there's no rush with these treatments. You just need to make sure that mentally you're in the right place to be having it.
Dr. Lauren, thank you for being such a fountain of knowledge. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Funmi, for having me. It's been a pleasure too.
And that's On Reflection. Thanks again to Chloe Hall, Beauty Director at USL, and Dr. Lauren Hamilton, Cosmetic Doctor and founder of Aesthetic Clinic, Victor and Garth. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at ORB Podcast. Listen every week through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or at orbpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter. This week's show was brought to you in association with Sunday Riley. certified B Corp, cruelty-free skincare, powered by science, balanced by botanicals. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.